Hello there, and welcome to yet another video where I discuss at length the disastrous mismatch between my favorite type and my favorite game. And so, let's not waste any time. I am Zen Mode. You are the one watching this video, and the question is this. Is Chikorita the worst starter of all time? Yes, or at least so says the general population. Of course it is. Who else would it be? But if you'll indulge me, let me rephrase that question for you. Is Chikorita the worst starter of all time, or is it just the grass starter forced to play through the Johto region? If we were to play through Pokemon HeartGold and SoulSilver with the other grass starters, could they really do any better than poor Chikorita? Because if not, I think there's at least a possibility that Chikorita isn't as bad as we think. So today, for you, I intend to answer this very question. Today we'll be setting out on 4 individual journeys with each of the 4 grass starters as our first Pokemon, and we'll be ranking each one's performance in an average playthrough to confirm once and for all who the best and worst grass starter is. But with such a Herculean task set upon myself, one thing became abundantly clear. These 4 Pokemon are very similar. It would not be outright incorrect to say that they're all the same Pokemon with a fresh coat of paint. And therefore, it's fair to assume that their performances in Gen 4 Johto are going to be pretty similar to one another. Any comparison that I intend to do between these 4 Pokemon would be extremely, perhaps even microscopically close. And so, I simply could not take a common man's approach here. That thing I do at the end of all my other videos where I say, yeah, it was pretty good, I guess. Weak sauce. That ain't gonna cut it here, because it's just subjective. We're not here for opinions. We're here for results. We're going in depth here. And so, let's start with some ground rules to illustrate how exactly I've chosen to go about this. 1. All starters are created equal. Pokemon has a lot of randomness to it, and we're looking for fair comparisons between each starter line. To get around this, each subject Pokemon will be genned in with 15 IVs across the board, a male gender, and a neutral nature, perfectly average. Although some starters are not native to Gen 4, obviously, each one will be using their Gen 4 learn set. No breeding to obtain egg moves is allowed because the average Pokemon player isn't going to be doing any breeding. 2. Each playthrough will be identical. To ensure the comparison remains as unbiased as possible, I've set out to execute each of my 4 playthroughs in the exact same way. I will only be playing up to the Hall of Fame. It's really only Johto that's infamous for being hard on grass types, and I don't think the comparison really means much beyond that point. I will take the exact same route through the game and fight the exact same trainers. This means that, assuming they're able to solo every fight, all starters will earn the exact same EVs, or stat experience. The starter will be sent out in every single fight, even in battles a grass type has no business partaking in, but don't worry, that's only most of them. If they faint or have to switch out in any of these fights and miss out on some EVs, I'm calling that fair. There should be a sort of reverse snowball effect if your Pokemon isn't good enough. Level caps will be in play, and rare candies will always be used to match the level caps of all gym leaders. Edging is not allowed. All Pokemon will fight all boss battles at the exact same level. We have to use rare candies here because in-game wild encounters are random, and this would create inconsistent EV spreads across my subject Pokemon. I'm not just going to EV train each starter into a spread that works best for it because the average player isn't going to do that. The best way to rank grass starters in HGSS is to just use the EV spread that HGSS actually gives you. I will be playing on set mode, so switching a Pokemon in and out is going to cost me a turn. Speaking of switching, there will be a consistent team of 5 other Pokemon on our squad. We're going to call them the B team, and they'll only be used when absolutely necessary. None of these Pokemon are game-breakingly strong, but they'll get us through the game when our starter cannot. Since we're using our starter in every single fight, I'm going to be genning in an experience share for members of the B team to hold right out of the gate so that we can stay within level caps, but they'll generally stay about 2 levels below our starter. And lastly, no healing items from the bag are going to be used in battle. We're ranking each Pokemon on their own merit, not how many Hyper Potions I can spam. Now, I can treat each Pokemon as equally as I want, but it's all meaningless if I'm just telling you that it's good or bad in the end. And so, my next course of action was to combine my 2 favorite passions in life, Pokemon and chicken parm. Oh, you're saying it's math? We're going to be using math. Oh, Jesus. That is right. I set out to create a formula that will give me a numeric value, an overall score that tells me exactly how well a Pokemon performs throughout my playthrough. For how much of the game is this Pokemon useful? I call it a Pokemon's contribution score, and the concept is simple. All we're doing is taking a Pokemon's overall performance in battle and subtracting it by the utility cost, all of the resources that we invest into it, and divide it by 100 to give us a percentage. If we had a level 100 Dragon Dancing Gyarados at our side from the very beginning, and we single-handedly swept through every single fight in the game without spending any resources on it, it would get a perfect score of 100. If we took a level 1 Sunkern throughout the game and it lost every single fight instantly, its score would be 0, but it wouldn't actually dip into the negatives. It won't actively work against us unless we spend a resource like a TM on it. Now, let me quickly explain how these two values are broken down, starting with battle performance. Pokemon HeartGold and SoulSilver are composed of 25 boss fights, at least in the Johto leg of it. The total possible value of all these boss fights will add up to 100. But not all boss fights are created equal. For example, a Pokemon's contribution against Champion Lance is far more valuable than a Pokemon's contribution against, say, Proton 1. And so, I've sorted all 25 boss fights into 5 groups of 5, ranking their difficulty from 1 to 5 stars. The more stars, the higher a fight's value. I'm not basing this on outright level, but rather how challenging this fight is at the point of the game that you take it on. And not specifically for grass types either. Petrol 2 might be a tough fight for grass types, but basically any special attacker worth his salt can one-shot his entire team. 1 stars would be like, yeah, I guess this counts as a boss fight, highlighted mostly by Rocket executive fights and your very first rival fight where we're both just mashing tackle. 2 stars are a bit more memorable, capped off by the second Ariana fight. 3 stars are middle of the road. You'll definitely need to start prepping a little bit to take them down, the hardest of these fights being Gym Leader Bugsy. 4 stars start to get serious. We're looking at some of the hardest Gym Leader fights like Gym Leader Whitney and even Elite 4 Bruno. Sorry Bruno, but you're just not quite packing the same punch as the rest of the Elite 4. I actually think Gym Leader Claire is a tougher fight as she marks the cutoff for the 5-star bosses, followed by the rest of the Elite 4 and of course, Champion Lance. Now, I understand that there's room for debate over which fights are the hardest. Look, I've beaten this game like 50 times and at a certain point, I just have to go with my experience and run with it. But there's also a lot in between just winning and losing a battle, and I want to be as precise as possible with my analysis. And so, I've implemented a performance multiplier based on 5 different outcomes of a battle. A Pokemon will earn full points, a 100% multiplier if they single-handedly sweep a fight with absolutely no help from the B team. An 80% multiplier will be applied for a full sweep of a fight with a team member switching in. This can be to shake off a stat buff, confusion, or maybe even a curse, but the defining factor is that the B team member cannot perform a move. It can't contribute to the fight whatsoever. So this is still a dominant performance from our starter with a small asterisk. A 60% multiplier will be applied for getting the majority of KOs in a fight. That's rounding up, so if you want that 0.6, you'll need to take out 3 of Claire's 4 Pokemon for example, not just 2. A 40% multiplier will be applied if a full sweep is achieved with setup help from the B team. I've picked a B team with a lot of status and debuff moves for this very reason, but I'm still not going to give the subject Pokemon a ton of credit for setting up an elite Pokemon that's been dropped to -6 attack and put to sleep, because most Pokemon can do that. You're not that special. And lastly, if you get half the KOs in a battle or less, you'll have to settle for only 20% of that battle's points. Even with a negative type matchup, most Pokemon should score at least 1 KO in every fight. I know I've just thrown a lot at you, so here's a brief example. Let's say that my Bayleef is taking on Gym Leader Morty and, by the grace of God, it defeats 3 of his 4 Pokemon, but it just doesn't have enough gas in the tank for the Gengar and the B team takes it from there. A 4-star fight like Morty is valued at 5.4%, and Bayleef earned a respectable 60% of those points by earning the majority of kills in this battle. So, he earns 3.24% of this fight out of a possible 5.4. At the end of the run, points earned from all 25 boss fights will be added up to give us a Pokemon's total battle score at the end of the run. Now let's get into utility costs, which is a bit simpler. The main currency I care about when investing in a Pokemon is TMs, since they're single use in Generation 4. So, a Pokemon will be penalized a small amount for every TM that I have to teach them. Much like battles, not all TMs are created equal either. So I've ranked them not necessarily by how good they are, but how rare they are. As such, they've been sorted into 3 categories. First, we have TMs that are infinite and easily farmable. These only include TMs available at the Goldenrod department store, including the Goldenrod lottery. It's true that they all cost money, but I just don't consider money a valuable enough resource that penalize you too harshly. Score deducted from each of these will be the amount of money spent divided by 10,000. A Protect TM costs $2,000, so it would be valued at 0.2%. A Focus Blast TM costs $5,500, so it would be valued at 0.55%. A Lottery TM has a 10% chance to be drawn, and each draw costs $300, so on average we pull our desired TM every $3,000, making each of these worth 0.3%, a pretty good value for some solid moves. Next, we have Infinite but difficult to farm. Though technically infinite, these TMs do require a pretty heavy grind for every copy. These include anything available at the Goldenrod Game Corner, regardless of value. Each one is valued at 1 plus the amount of coins required over 10,000%. So Swords Dance worth 4,000 coins will be valued at a 1.4%, and Flamethrower worth 10,000 coins will be a full 2%. And last, we have Finite TMs. Having only one of these available inherently gives these moves more value, even if they are a bad move. Note that if a TM like Dig only becomes infinite in the post-game, I'm still calling it finite for my purposes here. There's only one Dig TM in Johto, so make it count. The formula for finite TMs will be 1 plus the base power times 2 over 100. So, a measly move like Thief still gets an inherent 1% just for being finite, plus its base power of 40% times 2 for a total value of 1.8%. A move like Return caps out at 102 base power, so it will have a total value of 3.04%, making it the most expensive TM in the game. Besides TMs, there's only one other item that I consider an important enough expense, and that's a heart scale. But these aren't as hard to find as you might think in Johto. Check out this guide I made to see why, and for this reason I'll only dock 0.5% for each heart scale spent. The grind just isn't that meticulous if you know where to look. So that's it. That's my score breakdown, and thank you for indulging me. A lot to process, I'm sure, but you let me handle the numbers while you sit back and relax. As a general point of reference and for my own curiosity, I tested this formula out with the other 2 Johto starters who are considered to be a tier above poor Chikorita here. With the exact same rule set, Cyndaquil's battle score was 85.04%, meaning that the Cyndaquil line can basically beat about 85% of this game by itself, but it lost 3.25% from the TMs we invested into it for a final score of 81.79%. Totodile scored a perfect 100% in battle, single-handedly sweeping every single fight in the game. If that piques your interest, I would check out this video I made too. But it wasn't without some spending, as we spent 9.64% in TMs and heart scales to get us there, giving the Totodile line a final score of 90.36%. I don't think there's any Pokemon that could possibly score higher in Johto, given Totodile's perfect availability, so consider this the gold standard. Congrats, Totodile. An overall note is that I'll be doing my best to achieve the highest score possible with each Pokemon. I'm going to be weighing my decisions quite heavily, playing the long game and the short game simultaneously. If I have to waste an expensive TM like Sludge Bomb just to clear a single fight, I'm not going to do it if the cost outweighs the benefit. Of course, the specifics I've gone over don't cover everything about a Pokemon, just what I personally value. I'd like to cover a couple key factors that I've chosen to not factor into my ranking. Utility. Although catching Pokemon and farming items is useful, we're mostly looking at overall strength today. It should be noted that all my subject Pokemon have very similar archetypes anyway, with some minor exceptions. Bulbasaur learns Sleep Powder and Stun Spore, which is pretty useful for catching purposes, and Treecko learns False Swipe once evolved. If you really value that utility, you can just tack on however much these moves mean to you at the very end. Regular trainers. I shouldn't have to tell you that normal trainers throughout the game are basically cannon fodder, and that's especially true in Johto. You can tell what types they're going to be using based on their trainer class, and you can send out the appropriate counter accordingly. They just aren't challenging enough to factor in. We're going to be avoiding every optional trainer we can. Turn efficiency. This one's a bit controversial, but for my ranking today, I won't be factoring in how long it takes a Pokemon to clear a battle. A win is a win, whether it be in 1 turn or 10, and frankly, this process is complicated enough without counting turns. Acquiring held items. I'm not going to penalize a Pokemon for needing a held item to win a battle. The way I see it, the average player will want to acquire important held items like the Shell Bell, Wide Lens, or Choice Specs because they're valuable items that can be used by the entire team. You'll want to obtain them regardless, and they're technically infinite use, so there's no real input cost here. Even berries are technically infinite. Now, there's one last itty-bitty issue standing in our way. Not a lot of people are aware of this, but Pokemon has a lot of bullshit. I mean, luck. I may plan a well-thought-out, galaxy-brain strategy only for my plans to go completely awry because I miss a 95% accurate Razor Leaf or suffer a critical hit. There are so many unpredictable variables at play that aren't really the Pokemon's fault. I can't really get around this either, it's just part of Pokemon. I can only mitigate it, average it out. Each Pokemon will be given 3 attempts for each battle, and I can only hope that this is a solid enough way to average our luck out. If my strategy can't clear a fight in 3 attempts, then it probably wasn't a good strategy to begin with, and points should be docked there. One small asterisk is critical hits. I don't like them here because they have nothing to do with how good a Pokemon is. Bulbasaur getting a KO with a crit that Chikorita just didn't get doesn't really have anything to do with how good Bulbasaur is, he just got lucky, and he shouldn't really be given points for that. And so, if my Pokemon lands or receives what I'll call an unwarranted crit and it actually affects the outcome of the battle, I'll just reset the fight, and it won't cost an attempt. The exception here is the high crit moves like Razor Leaf or Leaf Blade. Here, I actually can credit the Pokemon because it learns a move with boosted crit odds. It should be critting more. I'll call these warranted crits, whether they're coming from or against my Pokemon, and they won't be erased from the scorecard. Okay, I'm done. With all the formalities out of the way, what do you say we meet some Pokemon? Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Oak the Bulbasaur, Elm the Chikorita, Birch the Treecko, and Rowan the Turtwig. Let's start with the Pokemon with the home advantage. Elm probably has the most on the line today and isn't exactly the most exciting starter option. I would consider him the most all-around of all the grass starters. The new Bark native has no secondary type, nor does he lean towards the physical or special. He's never even heard of min-maxing, and he doesn't really have any moves that separate him from the herd either. If I had to pick a signature move for him, I guess it would be Synthesis since it gets it so early, but I'm just not sure that's going to be enough to take him to the top. Oak can be considered an upgrade to Chikorita in almost every way. The so-called King of Kanto has a partial poison typing that neutralizes some key weaknesses other contestants are going to have to face, like bug and poison types. He also gets 2 of the best moves that a grass starter can ask for, Leech Seed and Sleep Powder. I imagine that these 2 moves combined are going to allow him to take down almost any Pokemon in the game slowly but surely. Bulbasaur has had everything handed to him on a silver platter in Kanto, but if he gets cocky, Johto might be a rude awakening for him. Birch is cut from a different cloth compared to the other starters. He's the fastest of the bunch and the hardest hitting. They don't call him the Little Root Legend for nothing, but his stat spread and his move pool aren't exactly aligned. He's a natural-born special attacker, but his moveset is almost entirely physical, and if he can't score a KO, he won't have nearly as much bulk as the rest of the crew. The Treecko line's greatest strength is undeniably his insanely vast TM move pool, but it's unclear if he'll need too much investment to outclass the competition. Rowan is the most physically oriented out of all our grass types, but he's also the slowest. The Terror of Twinleaf should probably be considered our bulkiest candidate, and he's got a lot of moves like Curse, Leech Seed, and Synthesis that show he won't go down easy, but I fear this gentle giant might have a couple cracks in the armor. I'm not so sure that his dual ground typing will actually be a benefit in Johto, and a lot of his key moves are gonna come pretty late in the game. The big question for Turtwig is whether or not he can get online fast enough to catch up with the competition. Alright everyone, that is it. Place your bets, leave your comments, let me know who you're rooting for. Which of these 4 Pokemon will come out on top and claim the title of Best Grass Starter in all of Johto? Let's play some Pokemon. We start our journeys in New Bark Town and immediately grab our grass type from Professor Elm. Already, it's just nice to see some fresh faces following us in the overworld. Look at my little friends. Our first silver battle acts as a sort of training ground for our new recruits, and they're all able to overcome the hurdle quite easily. Some of them are faster than Cyndaquil and some of them are slower, but it's not really enough to make a difference here. Clean wins all around. On our way up Route 31, our mom stops us and asks if we want some of our money saved. The short answer is yes we do, but this is another element of randomness we'll need to straighten out for consistency. I'm just going to assume that we'll acquire some of mom's items when we reach certain checkpoints throughout the game. All type-reducing berries will be obtainable after the 2nd gym, the Silk Scarf will be attainable after the 3rd gym, and the rest of the items that matter, the Muscle Band, Choice Scarf, and Focus Sash, will be obtained after the 7th gym. Got it? Good, we're moving on. Let's keep rolling to Violet City, where we're forced to climb the Bellsprout Tower. It's here that I'll point out that some of the pseudo-boss fights in this game, like Elder Lead, that I just don't think are significant enough to be scored. Still though, it's our first taste of Johto's adversity, and we're seeing each starter come into their own a little bit with their own strategies. Elm isn't hitting the hardest, but he's got the longevity since he's already picked up Synthesis. Oak is able to Leech Seed anything that isn't a grass type, but Birch is having a bit of a tougher time. He at least does have the slightly stronger Quick Attack, and Rowan can spam Withdraw to increase his defense so that he can shake off attacks like nothing. All my starters come out of this fight at level 12 and will be given one rare candy to match the level cap of Gym Leader Faulkner. But before that, we can make a pit stop at the ruins of Alf, where we can use an escape rope in this very spot to uncover a secret room that contains a few free items, including a single Oran Berry. This is the only tool that we can equip our little Sprouts with against the upcoming Flying Gym. Time to face Faulkner, and as you can imagine, this fight creates some turbulence. Nobody has a move that can make quick work of the Pidgey, so we get our accuracy dropped by Sand Attack quite often. By the time his Ace Pidgeotto comes in, it's clear that Birch and Rowan are off to the slowest start, as they just can't keep up with the big bird's super effective gusts. They both go down quite easily and will only get 20% of Faulkner's points. Oak is a cut above, however, as he's learned Sleep Powder right at the level cap. He gets his Leech Seed off to stay in the game and eventually is able to get Pidgeotto to sleep to buy himself some free turns. Little by little, Pidgeotto goes down, earning Oak an impressive full points to take an early lead. And that only leaves Elm. He does an okay job at tanking the gusts and is able to land a Poison Powder for some solid chip damage. From there it's a war of attrition as we spam Synthesis and Pidgeotto matches with Roost. Synthesis only has 5 PP though, so eventually we fall just short. However, we can switch into the B team here and let the Poison finish Pidgeotto off without Mareep having to do anything, giving Elm a surprising 80% multiplier for this fight. Very impressive showing from the home team. After that, we head south of Violet City, where we're immediately gifted a Miracle Seed by this old man, which boosts the power of our grass moves by 20%, as well as the Shell Bell found behind this rock, which will heal us by 1/8 of the damage we dish out. A couple decent items that should come in handy the rest of the way. Last on our scavenger hunt is the Rock Tomb TM found in the lower floor of Union Cave. You wouldn't know it by looking at them, but we've got a couple starters who can actually learn this move. However, it is finite, so its cost is pretty heavy, a hefty 2%, so we'll want to think carefully about when to equip it. Once we reach Azalea Town, we head down into the Slowpoke Well to clear out Team Rocket. Our first Rocket boss is Proton 1, but it's an easy fight, so nothing of note here. Full points all around. What is noteworthy is our starters hitting their first big milestone, evolving into their mid-stage evolutions. We've got some really intense fights coming up, so we're gonna need this power spike to even stand a chance of keeping up. First on our list is the second gym leader, Bugsy, who wields a Scyther right out of the gate, and this thing is an absolute wood chipper for my grass types. Elm doesn't stand a chance against U-turns, so the best he can do is bait a switch before scoring a cheap kill against Metapod and nothing more. That's a pretty poor showing for Elm, but let's see if Birch can do better. We lead with our newest B team member, Togetic, to lead with Yawn, followed by Charm. As Scyther falls asleep, Birch tags in. He's the only one of my starters who can learn Rock Tomb in his mid-stage form, and we're absolutely going to take advantage of that as we're able to take Scyther down in 2 hits and finish off the rest of Bugsy's scrubs. A good fight, but Togetic did pull a lot of weight there, so we settle for 40%. But Oak can do you one better once again, as he's got a dual poison typing, meaning that he's not actually weak to bug, and thus is free to implement his death by 1,000 cuts method with Sleep Powder and Leech Seed. However, Scyther does get a couple of leers off on him to the point where U-turn will one-shot him, so I do have to pivot Geodude in and out to get him the win. Still, a solid 80% against Bugsy is nothing to sneeze at. And last is Grovyle. Yeah, that ain't no Grovyle. Rowan unfortunately doesn't evolve until level 18, which means he has to take on this fight unevolved. But hey, let's see what he's got. I know that Scyther will go for U-turn since he sees the kill with it, so I pivot into Geodude to bait in Metapod instead of Kakuna since he quad resists Poison Sting and swap Rowan back in. Because Rowan actually has a trap card here. He may not have evolved to level 17, but he did learn Curse, which he can use to max out his attack and defense stats against the Metapod before taking it out. At +6, the sword-wielding Scyther is no match for our little Turtwig as the Terror of Twinleaf stands tall, clearing the entire fight. The Sinnoh fans are going wild for the upset of the century and an impressive 80% multiplier to cap off one of the green team's toughest gym fights. But in Johto, there's no room to breathe as we've got another tough fight against Silver next, and unfortunately, Turtwig can't take out Gastly fast enough to avoid getting cursed, so he can't make any headway in this fight, and I still can't evolve him even with a rare candy since Whitney's level cap of only 19 is so suffocating. The rest of the crew will show him how it's done. Birch has just the tool for the job with his new move Pursuit, and we can use Rock Tomb to finish off the Zubat and Quilava with style. Oak can just Leech Seed and Sleep Powder anything, and even Elm is able to get full points here, whittling away with Poison Powder. This Quilava generally won't go for the super effective Fire move unless he sees the kill with it, so all we have to do is land a Poison Powder and stall him with Synthesis to get the win. Once we're through Ilex Forest, we reach Goldenrod City, which offers us a ton of new tools to equip our Pokemon with. The major ones are found at the Goldenrod Game Corner, where we're going to want to start playing some Voltorb Flip to scrounge up some TMs, Swords Dance, and Substitute. These two moves are enough to make any Pokemon a fantastic fighter in Gen 4 Johto, even a Grass type. The former will play a vital role in letting us hit the damage thresholds we're gonna need to, even if we're not the most physically inclined. And Substitute sets up a decoy to take hits for us at the cost of 25% of our max health. The kicker is that the AI will not see this decoy and will spam status moves against us even though we're immune to them, buying us some key turns to turn the tides of battle. Not all of my starters are going to want to learn both of these right away, but we've got enough copies for everyone should they ever change their mind, as the investment is well worth it for such a low price. I know it's kinda lame to teach the same move to all 4 Pokemon, but trust me, this is the only way a Grass type survives a run like this. Again, I'm trying to bring these Pokemon to their full potential. I know you don't like hearing it, but this is what peak performance looks like. Let's put that to the test against the infamous Whitney. Elm and Oak are going to play this fight the same way, as their lead Clefairy is perfect setup fodder. We set up our sub, and the Clefairy can't break it without a lot of double slaps. You'll also notice that it wastes a lot of turns going for Mimic, which is completely ineffective against our sub, as we max out the +6 attack with Swords Dance before taking it out with our sub still intact. Miltank enters the field, but it's too little too late. All it can really do is attract us, but our physical moves are able to two-shot it for a clean win. But you may recall that our newly evolved Rowan is still packing Curse, so he can boost his attack without having to resort to Swords Dance. It just takes a little bit longer, but he still gets the job done easily. But Birch is going off the beaten path here, heading to the department store lottery on a Thursday to snag a Drain Punch TM, a pretty exclusive move that Grovyle can actually learn. And Birch knows a deal when he sees one, as this move is dirt cheap too, costing him just 0.3%. Because of this, he's going to forego the Substitute TM for now and use Drain Punch instead to knock out these normal types, and hitting it super effectively, capping Whitney off with a good clean win. Solid fights all around. Up next is a fight with rival Silver in the Burn Tower. He's got 4 Pokemon now, all of which are resistant to grass, but it's not as scary a fight as it may first seem, as his lead Gastly is basically incapable of breaking a Substitute, and it'll waste a lot of turns going for Curse, which is again completely ineffective. With all of these free turns, our grass types can easily set up the +6 no problem, even Rowan, who takes twice as long. Elm and Oak's only attacking move right now is Razor Leaf, but even a resisted attack at +6 is still enough to blow through Silver's entire team, while Rowan gets a little fancier, mixing in his new move Bite every now and then. Birch, however, is going to make quicker work of it. His moveset has become pretty diverse compared to the competition, as he's still packing Pursuit. The fact that he can hit Silver's entire team super effectively means that only one turn of setup is required before slicing through all 4 of Silver's Pokemon to earn another solid win. The 4th gym leader, Morty, isn't a grass resistance on paper, but all 4 of his Pokemon are part poison, meaning that there's just no rest in this early game gauntlet for my Garden of Grass types. Again, the substitute TM pulls some serious weight here as it cancels out 13 of his team's 16 moves, making it a pretty free win. Razorleaf isn't winning any awards in the damage category, but Elm and Oak have as many free turns as they want to win the fight handily, and once again, Rowan makes out just fine with Curse and Bite to get the win as well. But again, Birch is playing a different game. He's still the only starter who's foregone the substitute TM, so he'll need 2 free turns from Ghastly, which he graciously provides with a pair of Spites as we set up a couple Swords Dances. +4 attack is enough to deal with Ghastly, but the ensuing Gengar is faster than us. We are bulky enough to survive 1 attack though, and we can take Gengar's speed down a peg with Rock Tomb before finishing it off, and neither Haunter poses a threat. I'm really glad that Birch is thriving despite being more frail than the rest of the crew. I was worried I had to spend the Shadow Claw TM, but picking up Pursuit was very well timed. With that, our plucky plant Pokemon have survived the first half of the Johto region, and I'm delighted to say that it will get a little bit easier going forward. Most of the region is our oyster from this point on, but again, we will be taking the exact same route across all 4 runs. We start by picking up the Surf TM and heading eastward to the Lake of Rage. I should note that we can pick up the choice specs here for free as well. This is perhaps the best held item in the entire game, and it will give special attackers a slight edge for the remainder of the journey. Unfortunately, I can't really call any of our party members special attackers at this point, as even Birch, the most specially oriented, is packing Swords Dance and 3 pretty stellar physical attacks. Johto works in mysterious ways, I guess. We'll just have to keep these in our back pocket and hope they'll come in handy later. Here, we can acknowledge that Gyarados exists before running away from it and continuing through the Rocket plotline in Mahogany Town. There's a lot of low-level fights here that we'll want to clear out now since this is the easiest way to follow the wonky mid-game level curve. There's also a petrol fight halfway through here, but just because a boss fight is packing some Pokemon that resist grass doesn't really mean they're a threat, and the green team makes it through no problem. But Ariana surprised me here. This is a double battle with the literal champion on our side, so I wasn't expecting much pushback here. However, Lance ends up adding another degree of randomness to this fight, and he doesn't necessarily make our lives easier. His strongest move, at least how his AI sees it, is Fly, which takes 2 turns, and that often results in my grass types getting ganged up on by 2 Pokemon while he's in the air. Birch is able to end the fight quickly enough and claim full points thanks to some key coverage from Rock Tomb and Pursuit. Rowan's mantra for this battle is sub up and let Dragonite do the work, and thanks to the extra bulk provided from Curse over Swords Dance, that ends up working out for him too, coupled with the fact that Bite is a non-resisted attack for a bit of extra damage. Full points to him too. But Elm and Oak aren't so lucky. They're really feeling the 4 move slot syndrome as Razorleaf just can't take out this many Pokemon quick enough. Synthesis and Leech Seed are enough to keep them alive for the majority of this fight, but they barely earn that 60% multiplier before getting taken out. A surprising stumble from Gens 1 and 2 there. Fortunately for them, this fight wasn't weighted that highly. Again, most Pokemon who aren't a grass type can blow through this battle no problem, so I stand by where I ranked it. I probably could have grabbed them a Protect TM from the department store, but there are more important fights than this coming up, and I know we'll need to hold on to all the moves we've got. Maybe the mid-game isn't going to be as easy as I thought. For now at least, we can watch the bad taste of Mahogany Town out of our mouth and make the trek all the way over to Cianwood City, where we're going to be facing the 5th gym leader, Chuck. His fighting types don't counter grass, but that doesn't mean that this fight will be easy. The general strat here is to equip a wide lens to boost our accuracy, which was also earned from the Goldenrod Game Corner. Chuck's lead Primeape loves to spam double team and will want to keep that in check. Unfortunately, Elm can't get back in the winners column as his fully evolved Pokemon are just too much for him. He's gonna need a bit of help from the B team to land a Will-O-Wisp before tagging in and just stall Primeape out thanks to the burn damage. But Oak can create his own chip damage as he can whittle Primeape down in a similar manner thanks to Leech Seed. Both of these Pokemon can clean up the rest of the fight, but Elm will be docked once again since he couldn't do it alone. Rowan chooses the slow and steady route as usual, getting his sub up and stacking up curses, which once again proves useful against such a physical type. Both Pokemon spam their stat boosting moves all the way up to +6, but once we get there, Primeape's Rock Slides can't even break our sub since our defense is so high. It takes a couple of turns, but Rowan eventually connects a Razor Leaf for the one-shot, and his ace Poliwrath meets the same fate. And last is Birch, whose run has taken an interesting turn since we last saw him. At level 29, he's since picked up his signature move, God's Gift to Grass types, the legendary Leaf Blade, a 95 base power stab grass move with a high crit rate, so crits are very much on the table here. This is the strongest grass move any of our contestants are ever going to learn, so advantage Hoenn. Leaf Blade with a held Miracle Seed makes for insane damage, enough to deal with Primeape in 2 hits, and we land a crit against the bulky Poliwrath for perhaps the cleanest win we've seen yet. So far, Birch's exotic moveset is putting on quite the show. They just don't teach you these moves outside of Hoenn. He's carved himself a bit of a lead here, but there's a lot of game left. Let's see how he holds on. As we make our way back to mainland Johto, 3 of our competitors reach their final evolutions at level 32, and this is going to add some serious bulk to all 3 of them. Elm and Oak both pass on Petal Dance here, but are still looking spiffy in their final forms, but I'd like to draw special attention to Rowan specifically. Our boy has finally grown into a mighty Torterra, flexing an awesome design while also gaining a dual ground typing and learning the almighty Earthquake, which should easily be his most powerful move going forward and offer some great coverage that should really separate him from the herd. I'm really glad he's finally coming into his own. Wait, what's that? Oh my god, it's Gym Leader Price with the steel chair! Yeah, that's really unfortunate timing for Rowan here, as he's just become quad weak to ice. But the Tear of Twin Leaf isn't going down easy, and he's gonna come out swinging with his whopping 109 base attack. Comboed with a held Miracle Seed for some extra damage, Rowan is actually able to outspeed his lead Seal and hit a Razor Leaf for the one-hit KO. But his Dugong is a step quicker and hits us where it hurts with a quad-effective Aurora Beam, which also targets our much weaker special defense. But the Torterra toughens it out, hanging on and clapping back with another Razor Leaf, which gets the kill now that we're knocked into Overgrow range, which boosts our grass moves when we're at low health. Last is his ace Piloswine, and by the grace of God, the Tortoise wins this race, striking first with one more Razor Leaf to end the fight in 3 turns. Another crazy underdog win for our boy Rowan. It's a hard-fought win for him, but Price is no match for the rest of the crew. Our freshly evolved Elm and Oak are simply too bulky for his lead Seal, as it can't even break their substitutes with an icy wind. Unlike Torterra, Meganium and Venusaur are not nearly as slow as they look, and they've also got substantially more special bulk as well, enough to see them pass the Ice Gym with ease. Birch brings up the rear, but despite being unevolved, this fight is no challenge for him either. Since he can hit faster and harder than the competition, he only needs one Swords Dance for Leaf Blade to take it home. That's another badge under our belt, but we're gonna have to go back to back against Jasmine and her Steel types to cap off the mid-game gauntlet. Finally, Rowan gets a bit of a breather here, as he's virtually immune to her 2 Magnemite and can easily wall her Steelix to put Jasmine in the dirt. The Kanto-Johto duo also get off scot-free here, since the Magnemite are incapable of breaking a sub. These 2 can Swords Dance all they want before powering through these tanky Pokemon with Razor Leaf. As usual, Birch's fight looks a little bit different. He's had to face 2 extra gym leaders in his unevolved form, but the Little Rude legend isn't backing down. He's going to be holding a Cherry Berry here, reading the Thunder Wave from her lead Magnemite. He can then set up in this Pokemon's face with a couple of Swords Dances and steal some HP back with Drain Punch. Steelix is much more threatening though, as a +4 Leaf Blade can't even bring it down to half health. Fortunately, it wastes a turn going for Sandstorm, so we can get off one more Swords Dance as it misses an Iron Tail. We would have survived one, but Birch caps off the fight with an unnecessary crit and finishes off the last Magnemite to take it home. With 7 badges in our pocket, it's time to head back to Goldenrod to deal with Team Rocket. These fights aren't that scary for most Pokemon, but unfortunately, my grass types are back on the menu. Not only are these battles going to pose a serious challenge for us, but I'll have to be really careful with my movesets here. Grass coverage will be next to worthless for this stretch, but I've got to play the long game and the short game. I'll need to think carefully about which moves I delete, because this is a tight race and I don't want to cost anyone points. As we clear out a couple grunts, we finally see the Little Rude legend evolve into his final form, a striking Sceptile. Birch has really held his own up to this point, and it looks like he's about to hit that next level. Is what I would say if Executive Petrol didn't completely shut him down. He's got a brain dead team with a bunch of coughing and a wheezing, but they're just too physically bulky for Birch to break through. To keep up here, Birch finally has to bite the bullet and learn the substitute TM in place of Rock Tomb. His Coughing have about a 50-50 chance of going for Sludge or Smokescreen, the latter of which grants us a free turn with a sub up. A couple Sword Stances and we can tear through the army of purple Puffballs. A bit of a reality check there, but Birch is able to adjust. The rest of the squad has an easier time with it. Oak can't even get poison, so he comes out pretty cleanly, but Elm and Rowan will need a bit of fine-tuning. I decide to teach them both the Strength TM, which is completely free thanks to it being infinite use. Elm's only attacking move up to this point has been Razor Leaf and will need something a bit better that won't be resisted by everything in the game. But I also want to avoid the heavy cost of the return TM unless I absolutely need it. The neutral damage from Strength is enough to see him through with a little bit of help from the Shell Bell to keep him alive. Rowan does have another great attacking move in Earthquake, but Petrol's whole team is immune to it with Levitate. Instead, I actually choose to drop Substitute here because he's just not using it as well as the competition. I'm close enough to the move Deleter at this point that I don't really care about having to hold on to Strength, and the new move is enough to see these two over the first hurdle. But Rival Silver is next up and he's playing Hardball this time. Elm's up first and he does an okay job at tanking Golbat's Air Cutters. His natural bulk buys him enough time to get off a couple Sword Stances to the point where Strength can take it out. Now, Grass types have a lot going against them in Johto, but one slight boon for them is that Silver's Bolava is the only starter that will not yet be fully evolved for this fight, which means that Elm can breathe a sigh of relief, outspeeding the mid-stage Pokemon and taking him out with a Strength as well. The Shell Bell sustains him as he makes his way through the rest of our rival's team. Luckily for Elm, I did have the foresight to hold on to Razor Leaf instead of Synthesis, which gives us something to hit his Ghost-type Haunter with. Another tough fight, but Elm comes out on the right side of it. As usual, the King of Kanto keeps things comfortable. As long as he's got a Leech Seed up, he's basically untouchable, and the unevolved opponents can't really get much damage on him. Birch doesn't have as much time to set up, but he's also able to rely on the awesome power of Leaf Blade, which can cut through opposing Pokemon despite even a quad resistance. He's also able to sustain himself with Drain Punch when he needs to keep his HP afloat, seeing him through unscathed as well. But Rowan's having a tougher time of it. He just doesn't have the special bulk that Elm and Oak do, so he's taking heavy damage even from a Golbat. Not only that, but Silver also has a new Pokemon, Sneasel, which he'll bring out right away. Again, special ice moves are Rowan's kryptonite, blowing him away with a quad-effective Icy Wind. What actually does get him through this fight in one piece is a held Choice Scarf, which was bought by our mom once we earned 7 badges. This item grants us +1 speed at the cost of the ability to select a different move without switching out. This means that Rowan will need to pivot into the B team, which will dock him some points, but he is able to one-shot most of Silver's Pokemon once he's got the right move loaded up. Even still, these switches aren't free and he still can't make his way through the entire team before fainting. A tough one there for Rowan, but my grass types aren't even out of the woods yet. Proton's final fight is a mere footnote, only carrying 2 Pokemon, but Ariana is a tough cookie once again. Luckily, Rowan's on the rebound here as her lead Arbok isn't much of a threat to him. One Sword Stance is enough prep to send it packing with Earthquake, and her Murkrow is a physical attacker, so we can shake off a wing attack before clapping back with a Strength. Finally, we can actually outspeed her Ace Vileplume, and a +1 neutral Earthquake gets the big man back in the win column. Unfortunately for Ariana, the lady has no answer for the substitute TM as our other 3 compadres are able to outspeed Arbok to get one off, while it continuously throws out the ineffective Glare, giving the green team clean wins all around. Team Rocket's curtain call is Rocket Boss Archer, who may be our toughest fight yet. Nothing has been able to stop Oak for some time now, but the King of Kanto is finally facing some difficulty here. Now that Silver's Haunter is behind us, we can afford to drop Razor Leaf for strength as well to hit his Pokemon for neutral damage. However, Archer's Houndour and Doom actually pack Fire Fang, which hits Oak's weaker physical defense, and he just can't survive 2 of them. Now, he can sweep this fight with the Choice Specs plus the Sludge Bomb TM, but that's a pretty expensive move that won't have any value after this fight. So the cost of that, plus the cost of a heart scale to relearn something just isn't worth it, so Oak swallows the point loss here, taking out the weaker 2 Pokemon for the majority of kills. Elm doesn't fare much better. He is physically bulkier than his Gen 1 counterpart, but still can't handle the Houndoom. He too takes the 60% before the big dog sends him packing. Birch is a step quicker than the competition as usual, and he can use a held Akka Berry to weaken Houndour's Fire Fang to buy him a couple of Sword Stances. Drain Punch is incredibly useful once again, hitting the Dark type super effectively while keeping him alive to just barely squeak through this one. Rowan brings up the rear, but he's actually got the advantage here against these physical movesets. He doesn't seem to mind Houndoom's Fire Fang all too much, and he can outdamage the Coughing despite some bad luck from Poison to take us home. That's a wrap on the Rocket Gauntlet. Definitely a step up in difficulty for the green team there, but we can finally make our way to Western Johto to clean up our movesets. We've now got access to the move Deleter and Reminder. The fights are only going to get tougher from here on out, so it's nice that my Pokemon can finally start pulling out all the stops. The only thing standing between us and a full set of badges is Gym Leader Claire, and of course, her Dragon types are no slouch. But her lead Gyarados is our opening, as its strongest move is Dragon Rage, which only does 40 damage without a secondary effect. This gives the Newbark native enough time to set up 3 Swords Dances, hanging on with just 5 HP. He may seem cornered, but Elm has actually dropped Substitute to relearn his favorite move, Synthesis, to heal himself at will back to a safe amount of health. I've also chosen to spend the Return TM on him in place of Strength. It's a pretty big investment, but Meganium's move pool is so shallow that I'm confident he'll be hanging onto it for the rest of the game, and he's proving it to be a good investment, making clean work of the rest of Claire's team. Oak is up next, and he's clearly taken his loss against Archer to heart. He's also relearned his signature move, Sleep Powder, in place of Strength, which gives him all the time in the world to set up on Gyarados as well before also earning his final gym badge. As usual, it's up to Burst to shake things up. He's got considerably less HP than his bulkier brethren, so he can only take 2 Dragon Rages, enough to only get him to +3 attack after the drop from Intimidate. However, Gyarados has just knocked us into Overgrow, and Birch is equipped with a Miracle Seed, meaning that his boosted Leaf Blade is enough for the one-shot. In fact, this move is so strong that it can cut through Claire's entire team despite being resisted by Dragon, no crits required. Leaf Blade is just such a cool move, and Sceptile might be the best wielder of it there is, at least in Gen 4. Like, this really impressed me. Put some respect on his goddamn name. But Rowan, unfortunately, can't seem to keep up. He can set up all he wants against Gyarados, he's even learned Synthesis naturally since the Rocket Gauntlet, but it just doesn't matter how much he buffs himself. He's just not fast enough to deal with either Dragonair, who are both special attackers that can hit him super effectively, easily taking him out. Yikes, that's a big blow for the Sinnoh fans as the B team takes over. With a little help from our friends, that's 8 badges in our pocket, and we move on to the game's final stretch. From here, it's a quick fetch quest to the Dragon's Den before a hop, skip, and a jump to Ecruteak City to focus on the legendary plotline where we're forced to face 5 Kimono girls in a row. Keen-eyed viewers may recall that I actually didn't include this series of fights in my boss battle breakdown. Much like Elder Lee way back when, I'm not going to be counting these fights at all. It's just kind of a weird series of battles, and I don't really know how to properly score it. It would require so much moveset manipulation only to change them right back to what we had before, and it's just a bit too complicated for my liking. Fortunately, I don't think it would make much of a difference anyway, as all 4 competitors are able to take down 4 out of 5 evolutions. Elm can take down all except Flareon, who can outdamage his healing with Synthesis. Oak can outspeed Flareon and get it to sleep, but he has trouble with Espeon since he's weak to Psychic. Birch also can't take out Flareon unless I waste the Dig TM on him, which I really don't want to do. And Rowan can take them all out except for Vaporeon, who outspeeds and decimates him with a quad-effective Aurora Beam. Just thought I should still give a brief breakdown of the Kimono girls since they are noteworthy fights. After that, we all watch Lugia do its little dance and leave immediately before making our way west to the illustrious Kanto region. Finally, Johto is behind us, but my grass types aren't out of the woods yet. We've got one last hurrah against Silver in Victory Road. This fight didn't go well for Rowan last time, and he's determined to make up for that. But Silver's going to be sending out Sneasel right away this time. Once again, our best bet with Rowan here is to just use the Choice Scarf to outspeed the Ice type because we can't afford to take a quad effective hit. His starter has finally evolved into Typhlosion, but once again, the tanky turtle is a step quicker, shrugging it off with another EQ. Golbat is next, so we do have to pivot into the B team to reset our move selection. Once Rowan is back in, we can opt for his new move, Crunch, for some decent Dark-type coverage, and the neutral damage brings Golbat down. At +1 speed, we can strike first and hit both Kadabra and Haunter super effectively, and we can pivot around Magneton quite easily thanks to our electric immunity, before finishing the fight with one last Earthquake. Not a bad final showing from the terror of Twinleaf. But Elm's on deck, and he's going to make it look a little bit easier. The Sneasel doesn't seem to go for Icy Wind since it already outspeeds, and Meganium can tank feint attacks for days. Once we're at +6, we can synthesis our health back and start mowing down Pokemon with Return. Typhlosion does outspeed and hit kinda sorta hard with Lava Plume, but the Shell Bell keeps things comfortable, and Razorleaf and Return seal the win for the home team. Oak is next, and he's gonna be pretty unorthodox in this fight. He's really glad he's got Sleep Powder back as he can keep his HP manageable with Leech Seed while setting up with Swords Dance. He can deal with most of his Pokemon just fine, but Typhlosion outspeeds and hits a hard Lava Plume before we take it out. No Shell Bell for Oak though, as he'd rather boost his accuracy with the wide lens. Luckily, Oak can outspeed the ensuing Magneton and put it to sleep as well, gaining some health back from Leech Seed before finishing it off. And last is Haunter, who we also outspeed and put to sleep, but Oak's only attacking move right now is Return, so he's gonna awkwardly chip away at it with Leech Seed, putting it back to sleep whenever we have to. It ain't pretty, but it counts. Inch by inch, the win is clinched, as Oak claims full points here as well. Birch is batting cleanup, and he'll have to get a bit creative here too. Since Sceptile is the only starter fast enough to outspeed Sneasel, it actually will go for Icy Wind, but its special attack is so low that it actually can't break a sub, giving Birch ample free turns to set up Swords Dance before getting its health back with Drain Punch. From there, +6 Leaf Blade carries us the rest of the way, as Birch takes us home with one more sweep. Okay, we have made it. All the adversity, all the hardship has led us to this moment. The Pokemon League. From this point, it doesn't matter who's in the lead. It's been such a tight race that these next 5 fights are all that matter. The title of Best Grass Starter is still on the table for any of our 4 competitors. It's just about who wants it the most. It'll be a grueling gauntlet. The league doesn't take kindly to grass types, and we wouldn't have it any other way. We've got a lot of TMs in our back pocket, but I actually haven't touched any movesets at all heading in. Together, we've watched these 4 plucky plant Pokemon grow from saplings into a mighty Oak, Elm, Birch, and Rowan. But there can only be one winner. With everything on the line, it's time to find out who will come out on top. Let's leave it all out there, gentlemen. First up is Will, and we'll start in generation order. But unfortunately, Oak has a major blunder here in the home stretch. He's the only starter that's weak to Psychic, so he's completely outgunned here. He barely has any time to set up, and even if he could, we're speed tied with Jinx and get outsped by the stronger Xatu, who decimates him. That's a really tough start for the Cantonian, and in front of his home crowd no less. You hate to see it, but that's gonna cost him, as he also misses out on any remaining experience from this fight. Let's hope that extra level doesn't come back to bite him. This is Elm's chance to outdo his big brother, and he's gonna capitalize on that opportunity. Without a psychic weakness, his first Xatu just isn't as threatening, and he'll get a couple Swords Dances off while curing a Confuse Ray with a held Lumberry. Return can take out his first 2 Pokemon cleanly. He also manages to win the speed tie against Jinx, but even if he didn't, he could tank an Ice Punch very easily. Synthesis just gives him the sustain that the other Pokemon just don't have, as he simply hangs in there against Will's entire team, finishing Slowbro with a crit Razor Leaf. Looks like the home team's the first on the board, but Birch isn't slowing down either. He may be frail, but he's still gonna set up right in Will's Pokemon's face as he gets off his Swords Dances. Jinx pivots in, and it does miss a lovely kiss here, but we are holding a Lumberry anyway, and Ice Punch knocks us into the red as we get off our last Swords Dance. Don't look now, but Birch has just triggered Overgrow, and there's simply nothing that can stop a +6 Leaf Blade that's also boosted by 50%, as even the bulky, type-resistant Executor gets sliced in half, and that wasn't even a crit. That's a huge flex by the Littleroot legend there, showing no signs of stopping. Rowan is up last, and he's got a tough fight ahead of him too, as he doesn't match up well against special attackers. However, he is packing Crunch to hit Psychic type super effectively, making his life a lot easier. Jinx is an Ice type, but by the grace of the Grass type gods, Ice Punch is a physical move, so Rowan actually lives handily and can chomp his way to an impressive win, definitely making up some ground there. That's 1 down. Next up is Koga and his pesky poison types. Luckily, Oak feels right at home this time around. He can basically set up all he wants on his lead Ariados without having to worry about getting poisoned or being weak to it, or bugged for that matter. He's at +6 by the time it goes down and can basically wall the rest of his team with Leech Seed in return for a clean bounce back win. It's a slightly steeper incline for Elm, but not one he can't handle. He has to dodge the poison from Poison Jab twice, but he's holding a Pecha Berry to increase his odds. At +4 attack, he can squash the spider. The only reason Elm has a chance in this fight is because Koga sends out Venomoth second, who just isn't a counter. We can just Synthesis back up since his best move is Psychic and continue to set up. Once we're capped out, Return can once again clean up the rest of Koga's team. But Birch is going to be having a tougher time of it. He gets a lucky break as Ariados wastes a turn going for Spiderweb, but Poison Jab takes out most of his health on turn 2. He's able to get to +4 and unleash his new move Dragon Claw, which I've retaught via TM for some nice neutral coverage. With a boost from a held Dragon Fang, it's enough for the KO. Venomoth is next, and we can barely live a Psychic to get off our last Swords Dance before taking it out with another Dragon Claw. This brings out Muck, and at +6, an Overgrow boosted Leaf Blade can take it out. That crit was not necessary. That's the majority of kills in this fight, but it's all Birch has in him, as the Crobat comes in and finishes him off with a quick attack. A tough blow for Birch there as the B team takes over. Looks like it's up to Rowan to ring it in, and his partial ground typing lets him do that quite easily. He doesn't need much setup to blow Ariados and Venomoth out of the water, and even Crobat chooses to spam double team. Eventually we break through with Crunch, and we're able to outspeed and one-shot his last two Pokemon for the cleanest win of the bunch. Nice job. Bruno is up third, but honestly, I don't even need to go into detail for this fight. All 4 members of the green team are easily able to set up against his lead Hitmontop and sweep the entire fight. The scariest part is probably Rowan having to survive an Ice Punch from Hitmonchan, but a held Yachi Berry makes it no issue. A bit of a disappointing battle, but hey, I put this guy in 4 stars for a reason. Sorry Bruno, but we're moving on. Karen is last and probably offers the most diverse team of the Elite Four. Her lead Umbreon can make things a little bit wacky with Confused Ray and Double Team, but Oak keeps a handle on things with Leech Seed and Sleep Powder. With a couple Swords Dances, we can take out Umbreon and Murkrow before Houndoom is sent out. We could survive a Flamethrower since we've got the special bulk, but it goes for Nasty Plot anyway, so we take it out. Gengar is up next, and once again, Return won't affect it, but we can pretty easily take the long way home with Leech Seed and Sleep Powder. It takes a while, she does have a couple of full restores, but Gengar's only attacking moves are Focus Blast and Lick, so there's no way we go down here. Luckily, we still have some returns left over when it finally goes down, and can easily finish off Vileplume for the win. Elm's battle looks very similar, as he easily sets up and takes out Umbreon and Murkrow. Houndoom does deem him worthy of receiving a Flamethrower, meaning that our Occa Berry is actually useful. From there, the fight is trivial as we're still carrying Razor Leaf to make quick work of Gengar, and Vileplume falls to return. Birch tags in now and can quickly set up on Umbreon, curing confusion with a held Lumberry in the process. He can also keep his health full with Drain Punch to outspeed and KO Murkrow and Houndoom. We've also got Dragon Claw now to hit Vileplume and Gengar for neutral damage, enough to take out both of them, finishing the fight. Last up is Rowan, and there's just not much that Umbreon can do here since we're so physically bulky. This time, we'll want to get up all of our Swords Dances here before taking it out. It's crucial that we take out the ensuing Murkrow with a Crunch so that we don't get plucked or whirlwinded. Her ace Houndoom is next, and I was holding an Occa Berry here, but it ends up going for a Nasty Plot anyway, and we can finish off the rest of her team. That's the Elite Four behind us, but one trainer stands between us and glory. Champion Lance has been looming over our heads since the very beginning. Unfortunately, our ass is grass and he's a lawnmower. This battle is where grass types go to die, and I'd be shocked if any of them even survived this fight. It's not even about winning here, but simply surviving long enough to scrounge up as many points as we can. Reminder that it's going to take a full 4 KOs here to earn even a 60% multiplier, and even that feels out of reach. Nevertheless, it's the final stretch, and it may make all the difference. I'm going to start with Rowan here because he's going to struggle the most. You can see that we can't even lead with him here against Gyarados because it outspeeds and carries Ice Fang, so there's no hope in setting up on it. Ampharos can take it out, but you can see how even the B team has their hands full with Lance's team of pseudo-legendaries. It sucks, but Rowan really can't hang with any Pokemon on Lance's team. They all easily outspeed him, and his Dragonite are packing super effective moves that just decimate him like Blizzard and Fire Blast. The only thing I could muster up for him is tagging him in on Lance's final Dragonite, the one that only packs Thunder, which he's immune to. Here, we've got time to set up one Swords Dance, but you can see the massive damage we're taking from Dragon Rush, and that's saying something. Rowan has the most physical bulk of the entire crew, but he can at least fire off a natural gift, a cheap TM purchased from the Goldenrod department store. A Yachi Berry turns this into a one-time, quad-effective physical ice move that can at least take down one Pokemon for a very cheap 20% multiplier. Rowan is forced to switch out from there, and that's the last we see of him. A very unfortunate fall at the finish line, but hey, it's a tough fight. I can't really fault him. But there's a lot riding on Elm's final battle, and the New Bark native needs to dig deep. The hometown hero has one last trick up his sleeve, learning the Reflect TM, also purchased from the Goldenrod department store, finally dropping Razor Leaf, which is near useless in this fight. Reflect will half the physical damage Elm is taking for 5 turns, meaning that he can tank Ice Fangs like a champ. This gives him enough time to set up all of his Swords Dances. It's gonna take 4 to max out his attack thanks to the drop from Intimidate, but Reflect and Synthesis keep him alive. Eventually, we can bring Gyarados down with a +6 return with a decent amount of health remaining. Lance sends out Charizard next, but this thing has a -speed nature, so Elm is able to stun him by striking first with another return. Dragonite number 1 enters the field and does outspeed, landing a Thunder Wave, but Elm breaks through to land another return. It does crit, but at +6, with the held Silk Scarf he's holding, that crit does not matter and the KO stands. But Elm will need one more kill to secure the 60% multiplier, and it's gonna need to come against the fearsome Aerodactyl. It strikes first with a super effective Aerial Ace, and Elm barely hangs on and packs everything he's got into one last return, but it's not quite enough. That means Lance is gonna heal and I sneak in a Synthesis, but we can't do this forever. Our boy grits his teeth, wearing one more Aerial Ace before clapping back with the return of a lifetime. Finding the high roll, bringing Aerodactyl down, and the Johto fans go crazy as Elm earns himself a well-earned rest, leaving it to the B team to take it from there. But let's see if the OG could match that. He's able to hang in there against Gyarados thanks to Leech Seed and Sleep Powder. Oak can get all the way up to +6 as well, keeping himself at full health by the time Gyarados goes down. Charizard is next, but the fact that Oak dropped the ball against Will means that he's one level lower and doesn't outspeed the Charizard and is forced to take a nasty Air Slash before putting it to sleep. We hit him with a Leech Seed, and I even get greedy, stalling an extra turn to heal a bit before taking it out. The first Dragonite takes the field and hits a Dragon Rush for even more damage. Again, we get a bit of HP back from Leech Seed, but poor Oak has just lost too much health. There's just nothing he can do as the Aerodactyl takes the field and easily finishes him off. That's a tragic end to a really strong run from Oak, not quite enough to land the majority of kills. Champion Lance is proving insurmountable, but last but not least, we have Birch the Sceptile, or rather, Graveler the Graveler. I cut my losses and lead with the B team here as the Meat Shield absorbs the attack drop from Intimidate before getting walloped by Waterfall. The Hoenn faithful are now on their feet as the man of the hour tags in scot-free. Birch can't live nearly as many Ice Fangs as the others, but he can just barely survive 2, clinging to life at a mere 5 HP, managing to get up to +4 attack in the process. The Little Root Legend is down, but not out. A +4 Leaf Blade is easily enough to slice through Gyarados. Charizard takes the field, and unfortunately, a neutral Dragon Claw isn't enough to take it out. But our boy Birch, the man of 1,000 moves, has the answer. Taking a page from Rowan's book, dropping Drain Punch to demolish Charizard with a Rock-type natural gift via a held Charty Berry. Dragonite number 1 is next, but we're still carrying Dragon Claw, which at +4 attack is just barely enough to get the one-shot. The speedy Aerodactyl is sent out, but we're actually speed tied with this behemoth. But the Grass Gecko wants it more, beating Aerodactyl to the punch, taking it down with another stab Leaf Blade. Lance watches helplessly as Dragonclaw finishes off his last 2 Dragonites, sealing this Cinderella story. What an insane finish from the Hoenn representative, marking a huge win not only for Hoenn, but making a statement for grass types across the world. They said it couldn't be done, but the Little Root Legend has done the impossible, sweeping Lance with a single grass type Pokemon. Asterisk. What an insane finish. As we watch our competitors cross into the Hall of Fame, I can't help but feel proud of them. But of course, we came here for results. So, without further ado, it's finally time to tally up the points. All participants gave it everything they had, and as expected, it was an extremely close race right up to the end. And I honestly think I'm going to start from the top and work our way down, since I'll have more to say at the end. In first place, with an impressive score of 84.48% is Birch the Sceptile. It was a tight race, but this shouldn't come as much of a surprise, as Birch had an answer for everything throughout the entire run. The only question was whether or not all these moves would be too expensive, but honestly, Johto hands him so many moves for dirt cheap. Drain Punch and Dragon Claw were almost free, being infinitely farmable, and he got a ton of mileage out of both of them. I also didn't have to spend a single heart scale on him. The game just naturally fed him what he needed exactly when he needed it. And honestly, a casual player can get even more mileage out of him than I did. You could also run Shadow Claw, which is infinitely farmable, and he can also learn Dig. Or we could have just held on to Rock Tomb a little bit longer for the coverage. We can even relearn Night Slash and X Scissor if we wanted. Birch could learn any move he ever needed without having to resort to the costly return TM. In a normal playthrough, when we're not asking a Pokemon to carry the entire game under one moveset, Sceptile clearly is the best choice, and the most fun for my liking. Obviously, he's not as good as he was in Hoenn, but that's going to be the case for everybody on our list today. It's nice that he didn't have to live in the shadow of the other two starters for once and finally be the top contender. Congratulations, Birch, you earned it. In second place, with a score of 82.48%, is Elm the Meganium. In perhaps the greatest underdog story ever told, the Chikorita line shocks the world, clinching a silver medal. But how exactly did this happen? Well, you probably saw how similarly he played to the Bulbasaur line, as these two were neck and neck the entire way. But being the all-around starter actually ends up working pretty well for a defensive Pokemon. He just didn't have to worry about weaknesses that the Pokemon below him did. He's not weak to Psychic, and he doesn't have a quad weakness to Ice. He's not frail on the physical side or the special, and that made him almost unkillable by the end of the run. You might think it took him longer to finish fights, but honestly, not really compared to the other bulky Pokemon. He just had to mix in a Synthesis every now and then and just let Swords Dance do its thing. I was floored by how good early Synthesis was, and it was getting him huge points in the very first gym fight. All in all, he just kept control of almost every battle he was in right to the very end. So to answer my question from the very beginning, no, I would not say that Chikorita is the worst starter ever. I know you may disagree with my process here, but I think I've at least created a shadow of a doubt. He won more fights and consumed less resources than two of our competitors. Simple as that. Now, he may not be the worst, but he probably is the most boring. I think that this format almost works in Meganium's favor because his moveset is so shallow that he never really had to worry about balancing 4 moves. It's also worth noting that if we allowed healing items as a casual player probably does, then Synthesis is completely invalid too. For most of the game, his only attacks were Razor Leaf and Return, and the dirty little secret there is that this is basically all Meganium can learn anyway, whereas I probably would have at least thrown Stab Sludge Bomb on Venusaur in a casual playthrough. So yeah, I understand why this line gets all the disrespect, but it's got a higher ceiling than you'd think. In fact, I would hesitate to say that he's even the worst starter in this game. Perhaps the most surprising result from this entire experiment is that Chikorita received a higher score than Cyndaquil. Now, I fully admit that the only reason this happened is because one of these lines learns Swords Dance and the other doesn't. I don't have time to really go in depth on my Cyndaquil run, but if something was able to survive its fire moves, we basically had no answer. In particular, this line was completely useless against two of the game's biggest battles, Claire and Lance, both of whom are worth 5 stars. Johto may throw everything in the kitchen sink at grass types, but Meganium is actually way more equipped to handle adversity than Typhlosion is, and that's where the difference came in. That's why I wanted to be so meticulous with each Pokemon, not just assuming a Pokemon loses because it doesn't win the type matchup. I know it's not completely fair to judge a Pokemon based on how well they can solo a game, but trust me, the gap between these two Pokemon is closer than you think, and I had fun pushing this line to the limit. Elm had a lot on the line today, and he absolutely showed up. Good job, buddy. In third place, with a score of 80.22%, is Oak the Venusaur. Yeah, I'm as shocked as you are. I honestly would have called this line the favorite before starting this run. I thought he could just Leech Seed and Sleep Powder his way through the whole game, especially with a Wide Lens, which he doesn't have access to in Kanto. And for 90% of the game, that was the case. Right from the get-go, he was overcoming Falkner and Bugsy without breaking a sweat. Oak had a solid mid-game and held the lead right up until the Elite Four. But Will really did a number on him, and he missed out on a lot of experience that unfortunately made a huge difference in the champion fight. Had he gained that one extra level, he would have outsped the Charizard just like Elm did and probably landed him the majority of kills, which would have vaulted him into second place. I hate to cost him so much on such a technicality, but I made my rules before I started. This run really showed how similar these two Pokemon are, as they played almost every fight the exact same way. It's just a head scratcher, even for me. On paper, Venusaur is the better Pokemon in almost every way. He's got a better typing and the better moves, and still somehow lost. I have to just chalk this up to Johto's design, I guess. I have to imagine that in any other region, Oak comes out the winner, as one untimely team of Psychic types really cost him. But hey, that's the home advantage for you. And you know what that means. It really pains me to say it, but in last place, with only 76.08%, we have Rowan the Torterra. Look, I can make all the excuses I want, but he was clearly a step behind the whole way through for a lot of reasons. Firstly, his evolutions were super untimely in Johto, though he still did give great performances against Bugsy and Price, which were both insane wins, and I've gotta give him huge props there. Curse did carry Rowan through the mid-game with his strong physical bulk, but once the late game came around, he couldn't tank a special attack to save his life, and his lack of speed became a huge issue by the end. Rowan was always trudging behind, and it cost him in so many fights, especially against our rival. He had the damage, but he struggled to actually get his attacks off. He's very lucky that this game grants him the Choice Scarf as well, or else he would have done even worse. On top of that, having a quad weakness to ice was a death sentence once the late game came around. Rowan just had no answer to anything that packed Blizzard or even any special ice move for that matter. That ended up making a pretty substantial difference by the end, and it was pretty clear who was finishing last before I even counted the scores. So what does that mean then? Is Torterra just the worst starter ever? Well, that's a pretty bold accusation, but in Johto, I would say definitely. His partial ground typing is a pretty objective downside. It's cool and fun, but it's a downside, and his immunity to electric was almost never used. It did get me thinking about how much Sinnoh kinda babies him. He's not seen as a bad starter in Sinnoh, but probably the worst of his trio, and he does kinda get worse as the game goes on. He's the kind of Pokemon you can tag in against the Pokemon he counters, but he just can't counter an entire fight like the others can. In Johto especially, he's gonna need to survive an ice move or a special attack at some point, and he just can't do it. But in Sinnoh, you can kinda see how the developers tiptoe around this issue. Most opponents are packing Ice Fang instead of Ice Beam, which is weaker and physically oriented, giving Torterra a fighting chance. They've also thrown him a bone by making the last gym leader an electric type despite not even having enough electric types in Diamond and Pearl, which is a bit suspicious in retrospect. And so, there you have it. Everyone gave it their all, and unfortunately, someone had to come in last. But hey, this was a super fun video to make. I'd love to know your thoughts on how I went about things and if I should change anything if I ever do something like this again. It's really tough to compare how useful a Pokemon is, so let me know if I should workshop anything before trying this again. It took me forever to play through the game 4 times plus the 2 test runs, but it was honestly a blast to make, and personally, I found the results really interesting, so let me know if you'd want me to compare any other Pokemon like this. Until then, I need to go touch grass, so thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.